Okay. We are going to start section 1, 2. It's more terms. The one thing that I try to explain to the first period is we're going to, eventually see an example down here. And when we do this example down here towards the bottom of the first page, we're going to focus on the current terms, but we should always be able to also still identify the things that we talked about yesterday in there. Okay, so that's kind of, as we move on through section 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, if I'm in 1, 4, and we're analyzing a scenario, we should be able to still discuss, and we will discuss the items that we talked about in 1, 3, still discuss the items that we talked about 1, 2, and in 1, 1. So the idea is that, towards the end of the chapter, we should have been talking about the stuff at the beginning of the chapter for a very long amount of time. And hopefully, at that time, a lot of the things that we're talking about, the terms that we're using are, second nature, and they're going to be easy for us to recognize and deal with. We're going to start talking about sampling in this section, but in order to do that, we need to talk about the data or data values that we're going to be getting out of our samples or from our samples. Okay, so talking about data, there's two types of data right now that we're going to talk about: qualitative and quantitative. Okay, now if I'm talking about qualitative, what's the root word for qualitative? Quality. Okay, so there's going to be some quality that we're analyzing, some type of characteristic that we're interested in. If I'm talking about quantitative, what is the root word for quantitative? Quantity. Okay, so when we look at that, that data is going to be numerical. It's going to have a number, a quantity attached to it. Okay, qualitative, if we look at this as a result of a categorical application, or categorizing or describing attributes of a population. Okay, so some examples of that are like hair color, eye color, ethnicity, religion, car type, gender, okay, blood type. Okay, when you've all been to the DMV and you sign up for your license, and they fill out, okay, what county are you from? What city are you from? What's your zip code? Now your zip code's a number, but it's a qualitative number. We'll talk about that later. We fill out our ethnicity. We fill out our gender. They're collecting statistics about you. They're collecting data about you. And those instances are qualitative. Okay. Now, when you do that, you also fill out height and weight. And those are numerical values, right? If there are no numerical values, that kind of data is quantitative. Okay. So quantitative data, data that are always numbers. Quantitative data are the result of counting something or measuring something. Okay, and we'll talk about different ways we can measure things as we go on. Qualitative data, it's really hard to run eye color through a formula. Okay, really hard to run religion through a formula. Does that make sense? So qualitative is hard to do our statistical analysis with. But quantitative, just because of the structure, makes it a little bit easier, and that's the kind of the stuff that we like. Examples of quantitative data are money, pulse rate, height, weight, number of people in a room, an IQ score. I think you're going to be more comfortable with recognizing quantitative. So that's kind of what I do. Is this piece of data quantitative? Yes or no? Is there a number attached to it? Answer that question. If it is yes, then it's quantitative. If it's no, obviously then it defaults itself to a qualitative data. Is it okay with everybody? Okay. So now quantitative, there are subgroups of that. Okay. There is a subgroup called discrete. Okay, and there's a subgroup called continuous. Okay, discrete would be something if I asked you your age and years. Okay, If I ask you your age in years, you're 16, you're 17, you're 18, something like that, right? That's something that is a whole number, a natural number. If I asked you, if we went to every room and we counted the tiles on the floor, okay, or the tiles in the ceiling, okay, they are whole tiles, okay, so we can count them, and we might say there's 3,000 in this room. There might be 2,800 in the next room, that kind of thing, okay? Those are discrete when it's a whole number response, okay? Now, if I'm measuring, okay, and I say I want to measure the length of every room, okay, now that measurement can show up on kind of a scale, meaning that if I use a tape measure, it might go down to like 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch or 1/32, 1/64, okay, however precise my instrument is. So a lot of times you're going to get like 22 feet, 0.225. Does that make sense? Okay, so you get a decimal part, and that kind of identifies that it's continuous if there's a decimal component to it. All right, does that kind of make sense? Okay, if something is countable, it's going to be discrete. Otherwise, it is continuous. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So when I'm doing something, when I'm trying to determine what kind of data I have, the first thing I ask myself, is it quantitative? Yes or no? If it is, good. If not, automatically qualitative, and I'm done. Okay. If it's quantitative, I say, okay, is this number something that I can count? Is a weight of somebody or the height of somebody, is that something I can count? No, that's something I had to measure, right? Okay, so answering those two questions, whether I can count it or I had to measure it, tells me discrete or continuous. Okay. Kind of go through, give you quantitative, discrete data. Okay. It says data that are a result of counting. Examples include number of phone calls received in a day, week, month, hospitalizations occurring during a month, those types of things. Okay. With the coronavirus and all that kind of stuff, the information that we're getting from the CDC, things we're getting from health departments, those numbers are all discrete. Okay. Half a person can't go to the hospital, right? Half a person can't get infected. Okay. So we're getting quantitative, discrete data there. Okay. If we're talking about, like, you know, say it brings up this idea of a cell phone. Cell phone companies collect data on you. Okay. If they're collecting, if I go to my bill, I can look at how many text messages I sent and received in that billing cycle. Okay. Well, I can't receive half a phone call, or sorry, half a text, right? Okay. Can't send half the text. So those are going to be discrete. But if I also look at the number of minutes that I've used, I'd have to double check, but I believe it tells me like I use 700.23 minutes or something like that. That would be continuous. Does that make sense? They're okay with that idea? Okay. So different applications might be collecting multiple pieces of data from you. Some of them quantitative, discrete. Some of them quantitative, continuous. Some of them qualitative. You go to the DMV and sign up for your license, you're giving all that stuff. You're giving eye color, hair color, which would be qualitative, right? Okay. You're giving gender. You're giving zip code. That's all qualitative. You're giving quantitative, discrete, because you tell them how old you are, right? Okay. And you're also giving continuous, quantitative, continuous, because you're telling them your height and your weight. Okay. If we look at the next example, so a lot of times these questions are going to say, okay, what are we looking at? What kind of data is being collected here? So it says the data are the number of books a student can carry in their backpacks. Okay. So you sample 5 people. Okay. It says 2 students carry 3 books. 1 student carries 4 books. 1 student carries 2 books, and 1 student carries 1 book. The number of books, 3, 4, 2, and 1, are what type of data? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Quantitative. There's numbers attached, right? So now we have to decide, is it discrete or is it continuous? Discrete. Okay, it's counted. You can't have half a textbook, right? Okay. The next one says the Data are weights of backpacks with books in them. Okay, you sample the same 5 students. The weights in pounds of their backpacks are 6.2, 7.0, 6.8, 9.1, 4.3. Okay, is that qualitative or quantitative? Quantitative. Is it discrete or is it continuous? Continuous. Okay. Continuous because you're getting those decimals, and we can be anywhere, based off the precision of our scale. We can go as far out as we can with those decimals. Okay. Let's think about this. The data are the number of classes offered during the school fall semester. Math offers 13 courses. Sciences offers 12 courses. Languages offers 20 courses. What type of data is that? So I'm talking about number of courses. 13 courses, 12 courses, 20 courses. Quantitative, right? Discrete or continuous? Discrete. Okay, I cannot offer half a course. Okay. I want to real quick. I'm just gonna just makes the analysis of this a little bit simpler. If I come on, there you go. Let's just go sentence. Like, there's a lot of pieces of data in this scenario. Okay, a lot of different varying categories. So you go to the supermarket and purchase 3 cans of soup. Okay, tomato bisque, lentil, Italian wedding. Okay, is that quantitative or qualitative when I'm referring to the soups that I've bought? Qualitative, right? Okay. Let's look at the next one. Says 2 packages of nuts, walnuts and peanuts. Is that qualitative or quantitative? Huh? If I'm talking about how much I bought, we may argue quantitative, but categorically, I've bought walnuts and peanuts, right? And those are qualitative based on the nuts. I think maybe this question could be a little bit confusing because I added both numerical things and qualities or characteristics, but that's why I was starting to white some things out. You can talk about them maybe depending on if I look at the vegetables, the kind of vegetables I bought, we can say, oh, you bought 4 types of vegetables. That's maybe we can argue that it's quantitative in some respects. Okay, but if I just look at the way I've written this, I've bought broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, and carrots. Those are qualitative characteristics of the vegetables I bought, right? That kind of makes sense? Okay. If we're talking about, we'll skip this. I'll let you guys do this tomorrow. We'll just talk about some things that you have experienced in your life that you might recognize as a quantitative discrete piece of data. What would be a quantitative continuous, and then what would be qualitative? Okay, maybe surveys that you filled out, things that you've applied for. A lot of times it's licensures that you apply for, like through the state or through the federal government, that you fill out this data. If anybody's family, this year's a census and they're trying to get data off the entire population of U.S. citizens, I guess not even just U.S. citizens, just people that live in the United States, you're filling out a lot of qualitative data for the most part, but there's also quantitative data, and then you're filling out, there's things about income and things like that, okay, which are attached to, obviously, or have numbers attached to them, okay. What about this? When you collect data on the color of homes in your neighborhood, and you're recognizing that you've got red, white, brown, tan, and blue, what type of data is that? Qualitative, right? What? Great. Well, that would be wrong for you, yes. But qualitative. There are times, and this is kind of where maybe it gets fuzzy, but there are ways that we can approach this and analyze this. If I give you guys a quiz or a test, and you score a certain percentage on it, and I report the percentage, okay, what kind of number would that be? Or what kind of data would that be? If I report the numerical percent. Quantitative, right? Okay. And it would be like you get like a 99.4, right? Okay, so would that be discrete or continuous? Okay, continuous. Okay, and if you think about it, when we do that, we apply a percentage. We are measuring your knowledge about that content, right? So it is a measurement. But like reporting on like a grade card, okay, especially the way our grade cards are set up now, if you got like a 92.7 in this class, all we report is that you got an A, right? So the collection was numerical, but the reporting is qualitative. Does that make sense? A is not a quantity. B is not a quantity, okay? So that does happen from time to time. We talk about that in more detail when we get to that area of reporting our stats. Okay. Anybody have questions on that? We're going to stop there with that piece. Okay. Last class, first period, we signed up for Math Excel, so we're going to do that too. But we did that at the beginning of the period. Last class, I just wanted to make sure that we got through everything that they got through.